Back to our lead story this morning. Well, there is mounting anticipation over the release of the fifth installment of the State Capture Report, which is due to be handed over to the President today. So yesterday, the State Capture Commission denied claims that the delay was because of President Cyril Ramaphosa's interference with the work of the Commission. In a statement, Chief Justice and Chairperson of the Commission, Raymond Zondo, said he needed to check the report for errors for the last time before handing it over. So after missing the initial June 15th deadline, the Commission announced that the ceremonial handover of the report would be later today. To help us unpack some of the political ramifications of the report, we're now joined by Political Analyst Asanda Ngoasheng. And it's always a pleasure having her. Asanda, great to see you again. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
What do you think's behind the delays? I mean, there's been so much speculation, and I suppose anything we say here is also going to be speculation, but what do you think? What's going on?
Well, I mean, of course, we can only speculate, but I think that, there's so much that has happened since the release of the last state capture report, and you've got now Cyril Ramaphosa currently caught in the scandal around his farm, around money that was purported to be under a couch. And so there's actually more pressure on the president than ever to not only engage the state capture report, but also show himself to not be using the Zondo report as a factional tool, because we've got, the conference that's coming up in December. But I mean, this is the ANC, and any and everything is possible. And all I think as South Africans we should be concerned with is the fact that the report is coming out today, and looking forward to seeing what's in the report, especially because rumors already have been spread that say that, Arthur Fraser actually features quite highly in this report, which would also explain why he suddenly, had a desire to hold the president accountable by releasing, the information that have led to this farm gate, as people are calling it. And I think that we're in a situation where the ANC has always been a political party that takes, anything that the state apparatus, anything that state intelligence provides it with, and uses it in its own internal battles. But I think that in some ways that is kind of a sideshow and not what we should be focusing on. At this point in time, we should be focusing on what is it that's going to come out of that report, and what does it tell us about the state of our country, and what does it tell us about the depth of the corruption that we have been hearing about in the previous reports that have been released.
So, I mean, if we have to just talk about Arthur Fraser for just a little bit, it's obviously one of those reports where the expectations are that we're going to see a lot coming out about the SSA. We're also going to hear a lot about Arthur Fraser, a man who says he was never asked to testify. He wanted to come before the State Capture Commission, but was never given the opportunity. And now he is the one dropping bombshells about the president. And, this expectation is that he's going to be very prominent in this state capture report. So let's focus on Arthur Fraser for a little bit.
Well, I mean, I find Arthur Fraser quite a scary character, in the sense that if you think about the fact that this is one of the people who were tasked with securing our country and making sure that in terms of what's happening globally, that he was the first person who would get that information, who would find out what security threats we're facing. And we're seeing that, I mean, to my view, he clearly was not very good at that job, in the sense that why was he only releasing what has been found out about Farmgate in 2022 if it allegedly happened in 2020? That's a whole 2 years of keeping information. Another question I have around Fraser is that, as a former state intelligence person, particularly one who was very high up, how is he even allowed to be in a position where he is revealing things that are found out as part of state apparatus? And I think, if you've read or watched even enough movies, if we can go to movies, spies are generally kind of sworn to secrecy. And here we have a spy in South Africa who is showing that, in fact, all along, part of his major role was to participate in factionalism and political wars more than to actually do his job, which was to be able to give us a true sense of our own security or lack of security as South Africa, and be able to raise the flag or the alarm about any and all security threats that we were facing. And I think that, his actions and his kind of behavior, whether you're looking at how Jacob Zuma was released after he was in the position that could allow that to happen, even though there's questions around that as well, or you look at his latest release of Farmgate, or you look at previous actions, it becomes very clear that one of the entities that was very much captured in South Africa was our state security apparatus. And that is very concerning, because that is the apparatus that we need in order to be able to preempt the possibility of any kind of security threat, particularly if it's international, but also be able to provide solutions. And I always go back, for example, to an era in state intelligence where things really were working well and things were good. I even remember an advert that state intelligence put out talking about, remember when Pagad was causing chaos, and remember this and how we solved it. And that was a time when South Africa could be proud of the state intelligence that it had. South Africa could have confidence that if there was indeed any kind of threat, that it was being dealt with, that it was being analyzed by people who were highly qualified, and that it was going to lead to either some kind of arrest, or at the very least, it was going to be dealt with in some way that means that, whatever threat it is either neutralized or minimized. And I don't have that kind of confidence in our current state apparatus. And I think that one of the things that is going to have to be excavated and reconfigured is the state apparatus. I don't think merely putting it in the president's office is good enough. And I think, in fact, that was a dangerous move by Cyril Ramaphosa, because that kind of continues the capture of state intelligence so that it becomes a tool for the president and it becomes a tool for whoever the incumbent is, whereas the state apparatus is supposed to be independent from whoever the incumbent is as much as possible, so that it is able to see even the incumbent as a threat if that is what he is or she is.
Yeah, I mean, it is going to be, just the whole Arthur Fraser issue is a major issue. I mean, this is something that, we can expect there are going to be a lot of repercussions coming from this. I mean, Arthur Fraser already, as we've been talking about with the whole Pala Farmgate issue, laying criminal charges against the president. He's laid criminal charges against former SSA Director General. He's the former Director General. He's laid charges against Paul Pretorius, the evidence leader, commission witnesses, Loyiso Jafta, as well as Sidney Mafamadi, over what he claims is false evidence that was given against him. So already these are the legal implications that have come on the backdrop, and we haven't even seen what the report is detailing. So, I mean, whatever happens, it is going to be an explosive day when we see what is in that State Capture Commission report.
Yeah, I mean, I think we definitely can expect a lot of heads to roll. And of course, as is true in South Africa, and I suppose globally, people who find themselves caught in the back foot and caught in the headlights of corruption usually are very quick to use the law to try and either delay, if not delay, but completely stop any kind of prosecution. And the Hawks and the NPA and everybody involved in prosecution is going to have to work even harder to make sure that they have very tight cases against the people who are implicated in Zondo, and those who may not even have been mentioned in Zondo, but somehow were involved. And I think that, one of the things that for me was very interesting about the Zondo Commission is that it really kind of rested on the brevity and the courage of whistleblowers who have been left unprotected, and a lot of them still can't get jobs to this day. But it showed us the potential. I think we often talk about the middle class not getting involved in politics and not kind of being interested. But that was the case. The Zondo Commission showcased middle class participating in active citizenry by calling out the corruption, the rot, the capture, and the abuse of power within the echelons of government. And they also helped us to have a bigger understanding of what is wrong with our Chapter 9 institutions. And they also helped us to understand what are the ways in which politicians use, abuse, and capture captured the state. And also they gave us a much better understanding of how the patronage lines of the ANC work and the ways in which power is subverted and the constitution, in fact, is thrown away. Because one of the things that I want to keep emphasizing, I like to keep emphasizing, is that Jacob Zuma, by virtue of being the president, was actually constitutionally bound to protect us against the very thing, against state capture. That was his literal job in terms of the constitution. And he did the opposite of that. And he should actually be in jail as we speak for betraying the country under treason. There should be some kind of treason terms that he is facing as we speak, because what he did was sabotage of the state. And that is the last thing you want any sitting president, or you expect any sitting president to do. But the one thing that I think, the Zondo Commission has given us is a better understanding of what are the loopholes in the system within Chapter 9 institutions, and how can we begin the process of closing those loopholes? And also, even in terms of the presidency, how much power should a president have or not have? And this is going to help us in terms of making sure that in the future, we ensure that we have a president who has power, of course, but doesn't have unbound power in some of the ways that Jacob Zuma was shown to have through just by sitting as the president. And this is why, it's very important that we have these reports and that we have these conversations around what it means, and that we unpack why it's important that there was the Zondo Commission in the first place. Because, it's obviously important that there are cases and that people are arrested and land up in jail for the crimes they committed. But even if not a single person was arrested, the Zondo Commission is one of the most important political events in South Africa post-democracy, because it gives us a clear picture of the ways in which our democracy can be subverted, and it gives us a clear picture of the ways in which power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And now we are in a position where we can implement laws, where we can think differently about even the character of the person that is put in that presidential chair. And I think even the furor around the president in terms of Farmgate scandal shows us that South Africans are a lot more alert, are a lot more kind of interested in ethical bearings of presidents in a way that wasn't necessarily, there before. But I think that, if we had had a Sireti Commission that had done its job, we wouldn't be even facing half of what we are facing. Because, for an example, somebody like Jacob Zuma would have been in jail a long time ago, because Schabir Shaik even ended up in jail on the basis of acts that were committed between Schabir Shaik and Jacob Zuma. And so it was always on a mission that Jacob Zuma was even not outside and actually even able to rise to the presidency, considering what had come out of the arms deal corruption commission.
All right. Asanda, there's a lot to talk about from what you said, but, one of the difficult things is that you talk about the outcomes of the state capture report and how important it is, and we need to ensure that, we have the ethical leaders in leadership positions, and particularly when we talk about the president. But all of this is happening in the background, where the president is being accused of a massive, massive wrongdoing. I mean, yes, of course, it's under investigation, and we do need to see what the facts are surrounding this. But, firstly, allegations that he's having phone calls with Justice Zondo, which they're denying, and they're saying they just spoke because they were talking about the delay. They shouldn't be speaking in the first place, surely. I mean, that already is something where alarm bells should be ringing. $4 million stuffed into our president's couch, that is something to worry about as well. We can always turn our attention to former President Jacob Zuma, but it just, for me, feels like the same thing is happening. Nothing has changed. And what is honestly going to change when this report comes out? Because all of the role players are very much so still in charge. They were there when this was happening. They are still there, and there's a lot that's been hidden. I mean, these are things we can't help but as South Africans look at and analyze.
Yeah, I think this is exactly the problem, that the sitting president himself was the deputy president. And so any capture that happened in the state during Jacob Zuma's presidency, he was in some way, whether directly or indirectly, implicated because he was the deputy president of the country. And if he didn't know, the question is, was he competent then as a deputy president? And if he did know, the question is, what did he actually do? And did he actually try to stop any of the stuff that was happening from happening? And so we are, I've said this many times, that we are stuck because of the ANC paradigm of having these political leaders who seem to be immortal and irremovable. And the sooner South Africa starts to divorce itself from the notion that the only people who can lead South Africa is the African National Congress, the better off we are. Because if you look at, the upcoming election in 2024 and the potential that South Africa can vote for a different president, then suddenly all of the concerns that you've raised are actually null and void, because you're going to have a new set of leaders in place who can even make different decisions. Because my concern at this point is not even necessarily that we don't have the full picture. My concern is that we may have the full picture, or as close to the full picture as possible, but as you pointed out, some of the people who are implicated are still in power. And as I've said before, the very African National Congress, NEC, is a list of the accused in Zondo Commission. And so what are the chances that the very people who are accused are going to make sure that they are held accountable legally and using other means? But what's going to be interesting, for example, and why I said the Zondo Commission is very important from an information perspective, is that there is always the potential of private prosecution of any of these people by any of the people who are implicated by their decisions. And so it's not only the NPA that can act on the information that has come out. Private citizens can act and say, this budget was meant for that. It was going to help me in this way, and it didn't. And these were the results of the implications, right? And so these are some of the things that I'm hoping that lawyers, I'm hoping that various people are looking at to say, how do we hold these politicians accountable on the basis of the information that's come out, and make sure that whether the ANC protects certain individuals, which it will, right? It's going to choose who are going to be the four guys and who are going to continue to be able to, to access power with them. And if there's private prosecution, if active citizenry is resulting in, a situation where people cannot just simply continue as they have in the past, and the ANC cannot simply continue to operate also as it has in the past, then there will be some level of justice. It's just a matter of us hearing now kind of this installment and trying to figure out what are the gaps that exist in the state capture story, and how do we fill those gaps, and how do we make sure that everybody, including the sitting president, if needed, is held accountable for every act that they participated in, whether it's participated in or implicated in by omission or by direct implication.
Yeah, just a final question, and this is where I'm leading into the 8 o'clock news, so we need to keep it very short. Are the ANC going to survive this? Because if there's one thing for clear, that within the state capture report and all the ones, the four that we've seen, the talk and I suppose the big pink elephant in the room is the fact that, no one is being held accountable. People that are implicated are still in senior positions. We are in a very difficult situation. Confidence in the country is at an all-time low. And when we look at our politicians, I'm not sure that South Africans are looking and saying, well, this is now going to change everything, and we're going to suddenly see accountability, where at the bottom line is that, the ANC is one of the key issues here. What is going to happen to the ANC after this? Can they survive this, honestly?
I don't think the ANC is going to survive this. And so it may not be that the ANC is going to completely die and cease to exist from 2024. Even it may drag itself all the way up until 2029 or even the next election. But I think they're definitely going to get less votes. I don't think they're going to get the 50%. And I think that, we're seeing already with the constitutional amendments that need to happen around independent candidates and the ability of independent candidates to stand. We're seeing around the questions around our electoral systems and electoral reform. reform. We've seen already in the local government that independent candidates have given the ANC a run for its money and are showing themselves to be viable candidates even sometimes for provincial and the national government. And I think that South Africans are tired. If you look at the amount of community activism, if you look at the amount of community organizations that are rising up, South Africans are tired and they want their country back and they want their country functioning and they want their country corruption free. And if you look at, what has been happening over the past sort of couple of years, you'll see that communities are taking the problems of the country very seriously and are doing what they can in their locals to start to put pressure on government. There's a lot more service delivery protests. There's a lot more kind of agitation and using constitutional implements that are available to hold leaders accountable in ways that hasn't happened before. And so I have faith that, this particular election, we're going to see some changes and South Africans are going to finally put a stop to the gravy train and the rampant abuse of power that the ANC has become accustomed to.
All right, we'll leave it there. Thanks for talking to us. Asanda Ngoasheng, ahead of the fifth and final installment of the state capture report expected to be handed over to the president today. Thanks so much for joining us. All right, that leads us into 8 o'clock. Let's get your news.